Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gary Davenport, otherwise known as the Godfather of IDP. I would like to welcome everyone to the 2024 Fantasy Football Expo IDP panel, otherwise known as the best panel of all the panels. But this isn't about me. This is about this esteemed group of gentlemen, these IDP masterminds. And we're going to start things off. We're going to get them rolling with the king, wearing the crown, the reigning champion of the Dick Butkus division, 13-1 last year. I'm not bitter at all. I really don't. Leo McNeely from RPO Football, FGM, Fantasy, who's your single most underrated IDP of 2024?
I'm going to start with EJ Speed here, and this is mostly going off of what I find on ADP on Sleeper. You know, you can find different ADP, different places, but right now that they have him at LB 46, and it's just way too low for him. Maybe it's people are thinking, well, his total scoring may not have been the highest at the end of the year, but it's because he was competing with Shaq Leonard at the start of the year. Once he took over a full-time role next to Zaire Franklin, he finished LB5 from weeks 12 to 18. He's back with the same team, no competition. He'll be the culture on the field quite a bit, so he's going to get the snaps. I see him kind of more in the around LB20. So if you're getting him anywhere between 20 and 30, and a good value, but even if he's coming off in the 40s, that'd be a steal. So EJ Speed, I think if you're playing on Sleeper, that'd be a great person to get for you.
All right, well, hand the microphone to the gentleman next to you.
It's Iggy. It's a stretch.
What is your ideal, in a perfect world, if everything goes the right way, your ideal IDP draft strategy?
Well, I have kind of a simple philosophy. It does vary, but I have to have a tackle guy. I gotta get my volume. I need to get somebody that's going to give me 140, 150 tackles. So essentially we call that the floor, right, for one of our players in the linebacker crew. But gotta have a good defensive line, usually to have a good linebacker. Why is EJ Speed and Zaire Franklin so well? Because they got a good defensive line in front of them. Now the best defensive tackle in the league. So I'll look for the defensive lineman to set up everything behind him. Is the defensive lineman good? And then you have to look at the inverse. Is the offense good or bad? If the offense is bad, that means our IDPs are going to get more opportunities to get plays. And I'm a big volume guy. The more volume you have, the more opportunities you have. So those are the three things I look at for my strategy. And I always start usually with my heavy tackle guy. I need that floor. So that's my strategy.
All right, we'll pass it down now to Santa Claus. Steve Tomasin from IDP Plus Dynasty Santa. What is the biggest mistake that IDP managers make in Dynasty startups?
Yeah, so in Dynasty, I think passing on offense for the big name IDPs is a pretty big mistake that people frequently make. So I know you want to have fun with it and get your Micah Parsons, your TJ Watts, the big fun names, and I don't blame you if you go that route. But there's just so much value later in drafts, double-digit rounds and later, where you could pick up almost all of your IDP starters in a Dynasty league. So stack up on offense early on.
Hand it next to Mr. typing away at the computer doing research. As always, checking that green dot battles, aren't you? And that's the question I'm going to ask you, Mr. Green Dot, Mike Woellert of the IDP show. The dot. What is the most interesting green dot battle that you feel is still maybe unresolved?
Well, if you mean unresolved, maybe frustrating. So I had Tennessee written up until last night when Minnesota decided to throw a monkey wrench into the whole entire thing with giving Brian Cashman the dot on the first series. So Ivan Pace a few weeks ago was on NFL Network saying, hey, I'm calling the plays, I'm wearing the dot. Like, all right, sweet. Why would he go on NFL Network and say it? So So it could be Brian Cashman and Ivan Pace as of right now in Minnesota. Cashman and Pace were on the field for, I think, 14 snaps in the first drive. Cashman was on for all 14. Pace came off for one snap. It was a 3rd and goal. I'm not panicking, but I am definitely keeping an eye. And if week 2 against Cleveland and it's Cashman again, might have to rethink things. But I kind of treat preseason as spring training, trying things out, learning things, seeing who can respond. So as of right now, I'm not really overreacting. Pace still was far more productive, looked almost quicker than Cashman, and Cashman has always suffered dings throughout the course of the season, so he hasn't really held up as a full-time linebacker. So right now, Minnesota's one that definitely should keep an eye on. I think Tennessee, resolved itself last night. Kenneth Murray had it with Jack Gibbons playing alongside him. Good note, they both played every snap alongside each other, so it does look like Gibbons' IDP value is going to go up. It does look like he could at least have a full-time role, so, but yeah, definitely keep an eye on Minnesota.
I feel like Blake Cashman was like sent to punish us for something we did wrong. Because he's not, I don't want to be mean, but he's not good.
Well, I think people were still going on. Well, he had an All-Pro. He was an All-Pro player during week, whatever full-time role. He had 11 tackles. He was an All-Pro. I'm like, all right.
Well, D'Amico Ryans
Right?
make everyone look like an All-Pro, which is why.
So
This is my mandatory. I have to mention Aziz Al-Shaair apparently every year now. Oh, love him so much.
But Brian Flores is still a good DC, so I think I could see him using Cashman as the guy that kind of communicates and let Ivan Pace make plays. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it, and I'm not saying as someone who has Ivan Pace as like linebacker 1 everywhere.
My man Jorge Edwards, Fantasy Friends, kind sponsor of this panel, your top rookie linebacker, both in the short and long term. We're not just looking at 2024. We're going to look at
So first of all, welcome everybody to the IDP panel. Glad that we're all here. To answer the question, though, I'm going to go with Junior Colson, linebacker, Michigan. Currently playing for the Los Angeles Chargers. 3rd round pick this year. Look, the Chargers brought over Denzel Perryman in free agency. That is not a long-term play. He is like a Blake Cashman, like Gary was kind of alluding to. Junior Colson is dealing with a little bit of an injury. He suffered a couple weeks ago. He should be fine. He is the future. You look back at some of his efficiency metrics, really high tackle rate, really low missed tackle rate his previous 2 seasons. The issue with him coming out of college was that there was just a lack of overall total tackle volume, but the efficiency is there. And while you do get a decrease in some efficiency with more tackles that you do rack up, his missed tackle rate is really, really low. It's only 3.8%. You generally want something that shoots below 10% to really know that your guys are getting those tackles without missing so many. And you'd be surprised how many linebackers miss a lot of tackles. So his efficiency is really, really low. And I think with the tackle volume, he's just going to flourish in this offense, not just for the short term, but for the defense, for the short term and long term.
I don't think it hurts him that he was drafted by a team where he's essentially playing the same defense he played in college.
That helps too.
Yes, it does. Nate Markham, I'd say something nice about you, but I really don't feel like it. The one IDP you have to have this year.
Yeah, the best part is when we have this not pre-planned, and Mike Woellert, who I value the opinion of considerably, talks about the green dot, which I did watch last night, because Ivan Pace is I want to walk away with every draft. And part of the good thing is this, we're at the draft time right now where if you follow Mike's work, if you don't, please do so, very valuable. The green dot indicator might suppress some of that draft value as well. He's already in the LB 39, so you will get him in at a pretty good discount. To be a full-time 3-down linebacker as your LB3 was spectacular. I mean, what we saw him do last year, which was when he played 98% of the snaps or more, actually 90% of the snaps or more, he averaged 10.2 tackles in those games. So while on the field, production was there. The concern, though, like Mike brought up, is that with them playing so many safeties and a single linebacker set, that's the concern you go into. But this is what I become, tape bro versus best ball bro versus IDP bro versus whatever. The tape says he will play himself onto the field. And Brian Flores isn't, he's not an idiot. He's going to get him onto that, I believe, third down row. So that plays in. That's our benefit, everybody, is now when we're going in, we encourage everybody to follow green dot. Then when they see he's not getting the green dot, it was preseason game 1 on a Saturday night. That's kind of meaningless, but not really. His value even maybe drops a little bit more. So now you're getting around LB 42, 43. He returns LB 20 value, and you have a fantastic baseline that you can maybe weight at linebacker just a little bit. And it's one of the reasons I really like him is because where you normally want to attack linebackers heavy, if you can attack any other position with solid, obviously, filler, and still grab a 3-down linebacker as your LB3 with, late 1-2 upside, I'm all in.
Well, I guess we'll ask the 64, the question that every IDP manager wants to know, especially ones who aren't especially familiar with the format. We will ask the king, when should IDP managers look to target defensive players in their draft?
It's really going to depend. I mean, what I typically do in the majority of my drafts is I'll try to fill up probably about 85% of my offensive starters before I jump into defense. It's going to vary depending, though, on how many offensive starters and how many defensive starters you have. If you're only starting, 1, 2, 3 defensive players, well, you're probably going to even want to get a bunch of your bench spots on your offense field first. But when you're playing in leagues where there's like maybe 8 to 11 defensive players, I think going in round 7, 8 is probably where I'm going to go. And I'm also going to try to look see if any of those top edge rushers are out there. And if they're not, then I'm going to just start hammering those linebackers and I'm going to get those tackles that Iggy was talking about. And so it's really going to depend, but really hit those offensive players. They're going to be a little bit harder to find on the waiver wire than potential defense.
All right, if you don't follow Iggy, and you should, then you know that Iggy is fantasy and betting. All right, what's the best defensive player of the year bet for this year? I mean, odds and chance of winning.
When you see those juicy odds, you always want to get the big money, right, on a season long. But I just kept it realistic. At plus 700, that's still great odds in the betting world. And that would be Max Crosby. He's been on the verge. This award's becoming more and more and more, specifically for the pass rushers. They're getting the glory. They're like the quarterbacks of the defense in some ways, as far as recognition goes. So he's been the tackle for loss leader the past 2 years, 22 and 23 respectively. So he's been locking down that stat. He's got 27 sacks over the past 2 seasons, which is really the indicator, right? TJ Watt led. Myles Garrett got it last year, deservedly so. I'm not mad at that at all. But I don't know if TJ Watt can go and keep doing the performance again and expect to get a different result. So I really like it. I think he's held by Christian Watkins. I think the Raiders will have once again, not so great offense, and that will aid Max Crosby, and he just doesn't come off the field, hasn't missed a play in at least 2 years. So I really think Max Crosby has an excellent chance, plus 700. He's already popular. People love him. Why not just put a little bit on him to be the best defensive player of the year?
There you go. And plus he wants 10% of any money that you actually wager on Max Crosby. Dynasty Santa. We already talked about the top rookie linebacker. What about the top rookie defensive lineman, short and long term?
Okay, so we had a pretty top-heavy class this year at defensive line. Really good talents, guys like Dallas Turner. And so my 1A and 1B are Jared Verse and then Laitu from the Colts. Climbing up, I was a little worried about him in the beginning because of a deep defensive line rotation in Indianapolis, but now that Samson Ebukam is out for the year, I think he could really shine in year 1, whereas I was expecting him to take maybe a bigger leap between years 2 and 3. But Jared Verse is an incredible talent, and we're going to see him join a defensive line that saw Michael Hoyt be a serviceable IDP player last year, and Byron Young, a rookie, come out of nowhere and have an amazing IDP year that I don't think anybody was expecting. So you throw Jared Verse into that mix, an elite talent guy, and I think he's the answer for both. He's my favorite short and long-term rookie defensive line.
Mr. Woellert, everybody wants us every down linebacker that they can get late on draft day. Who's your sneaky late round value pick at the position?
I've got a few. This will be probably could be a mid-season pickup. I'd look to Trevin Wallace and Tyrus Knight in Carolina and Seattle first. Jerome Baker in Seattle is already dealing with soft tissue injury, hamstring injury. So when you're already dealing with these injuries early on, before you actually start playing football, that's not a good thing. Shaq Thompson is dealing with a hamstring injury, and Josie Jewell has also dealt with various injuries during his time in Denver. So Trevin Wallace in Carolina could provide some midseason value as an every down linebacker, and same with Tyrus Knight in Seattle. Knight got the first team snaps last night alongside Terrell Dodson in Seattle, so looked pretty good. But in terms of draftable 3-down or every down linebackers, I've got three. Mac Wilson from Arizona. They really like what he's been doing. Came from New England. He's playing well above, well ahead of Chris Barnes. Mac Wilson had a 12% tackle rate last season, which kind of puts him into LB3 territory. You can pretty much get him for free at the end of your drafts. Terrell Dodson, as I mentioned, with Seattle, 13.5 tackle rate with Buffalo. He filled in for Matt Milano while he was injured. Dodson looks to be the heir apparent to Bobby Wagner, which is impossible to do anyway. But he's going to be on the field, it looks like, in a 3-down role as the play caller, where the dot got a 13.5% tackle rate, really good in coverage. And then Isaiah McDuffie in Green Bay. He's not at all willing to give his role to a rookie, and he is playing very well. Had a solid game against Cleveland, 4 tackles against Cleveland. He had a 16.6% tackle rate, but that efficiently would drop if he gets a more full-time role. But if he beats out Edgerrin Cooper, which seems likely at this point, it'd be Quay Walker and McDuffie getting the snaps at linebacker. So again, Isaiah McDuffie, again, one of those guys, mid-late rounds as a mid-season filler. He's not going to hurt you if you draft him and he doesn't do anything. You just drop him and you can pick up another linebacker. So those are kind of the sneaky to mid to late round guys that can play anywhere between 75 to 80% of the snaps. Provide LB3, LB4 value toward the end of your draft.
Mr. Edwards,
Sure.
the key to building a successful defense in a dynasty starter.
So, for those who are new to IDP, sometimes one of the difficult things to get used to is finding that connection between what you know and what you don't know. So, more than likely you know offense, but IDP it's like, what am I doing? How do I get into this? So on and so forth. The best advice I can give you, and it really is applicable to both sides of the ball, is looking at snap percentages. You want to see the trend of how often these players are on the field. So if you're looking at a startup draft, you want to get your veterans just like you would in an offense only. You want the consistency, you want that level, you want that fantasy floor to be as high as you can get it. But then as the season goes on, or if you're in your rookie drafts, even in rookie drafts, you're kind of swinging for the fences. You're hoping if there's a good pathway to snaps wherever they're landing. But sometimes that's just not the case. Sometimes you just have to monitor, usage as the season goes on. How many people play on the Sleeper app? Okay. If you go to a player's bio, it'll say snap percentage. That's important information. That's valuable information. Look at that, as the season goes on, and keep track of whose snap percentages are going up and how is that translating to fantasy production. When you get into the end of your season and you're trying to make trades or so on and so forth, look who finished strong. Like Carl Granderson a couple of years ago finished very strong opposite Cam Jordan, and he had a top 20 fantasy performance in Fantasy Pro scoring last year. So there are a lot of instances where you can find good value by looking at trends in snap percentages. And that is how you should really approach building your dynasty team for IDP.
Mr. Markham, give me an undervalued defensive lineman, and why is his name Myron Young?
Well, who did you say? What was his name supposed to be?
Myron Young.
It could be Byron Young. It's not. Could be. It's a similar player in that he plays professional football, and he, well, that's about where it stops, because it's Josh Sweat. I know last year any Eagles fans out there saw a tale of two halves for both the team and for Josh Sweat. And to put it in perspective, if you didn't, if you hate the Eagles, like many people sometimes do, whatever, you saw the first half, thank you, perfect, and you saw, we're going to agree on why Josh Sweat is undervalued defensive lineman, because if you look at that first half and you see 46 pressures, 7 sacks, 9 quarterback hits, 16 tackles, probably I could have left that stat out, but whatever, yeah, I like to include all. And you look at the second half where the team wasn't winning football games, I would love to tell you I have any clue why. I don't think I've talked to a single person that can directly correlate Josh Sweat to being the reason why the Eagles were so bad. But I've talked to many that can actually correlate his production on the field to why they were successful in the first half. And I think that they gave him another year contract. It's a proven contract. We've seen this year over year that when you have that, it gives you motivation, because we like money. He likes money. They don't like lack of production. And what we've seen, though, is production. That first half, again, what was he? If you look underlying metrics alone, PFF does a great job of breaking down total pressures, etc. He was third in the NFL in pressures. He was top 10 in sacks. He was 7th in quarterback hits. Year over year, we've done it. We've talked about it. Don't look at the numbers. Look at the metrics, and those will eventually turn into the production that you're looking for. It's the easiest thing to do when you're talking IDP, which is sometimes can be the most skewed thing, is to correlate production with fantasy value. I mean, that kind of is correlated, but you know what I'm saying. We don't have to talk about hows and whys, but Josh Sweat could, and will produce much better than he's the DL40 right now. I mean, at this point, you're basically just gambling with house money. So, yep, it's not Byron Young. Byron Young's good too. You can have Byron Young if you want. I only picked one player per category, Woellert.
Iggy, we're talking undervalued players. Linebackers are the foundation of most IDP lineups. Give me an undervalued linebacker.
Yeah, I kind of went a different path with it. Does anybody know who led the Bills in sacks last year? Anybody? Nobody knows who led the Bills in sacks? It was Leonard Floyd, all right? And that's why the Bills are going to have a big problem. But I like him from a linebacker perspective because I think San Francisco, he'll be there. Nick Bosa getting a lot of the attention. He had 10.5 sacks last year. He's had 9 or more sacks in 4 of the past 5 years. So I think that you don't have to worry about the consistency. And I think he's on a good defense with a good. He's not going to be the focal point, on any level. So I think it's going to free him up. His tackle production was low last year, so you can get him pretty late in almost every draft. So I think if he can get back to 50 or more tackles, 10 or more sacks, you're going to get a great return on your investment with Leonard Floyd of the San Francisco 49ers.
We'll do the flip side of the coin with the King. What is one IDP you want no part of at cost this year?
So the guy I wrote down here is Kayvon Thibodeau from the New York Giants. He's going off too early in drafts for me. I mean, maybe because he's young and a dynasty value, but like from a redraft perspective, he finished outside the top 20 at D-line last year in scoring, but he's currently going off on sleeper at D-line 10, which is way too pricey for me. He also doesn't have the great tackle floor that some of the other defensive linemen at the top are. He did have 11.5 sacks last year. I think he is a little bit sack dependent, and if those sacks don't come, you're going to hit up a bunch of zeros on your scores each week. So he was up and down a lot last year. I typically like, if I don't have one of those top stud D lines, I want a guy that's going to have a little bit higher tackle floor. So Kayvon Thibodeau is he also in the last 4 games he only had 6 tackles. So he's just and he finished at DN 45 in solo tackles. So gives you a kind of an idea that like tackles aren't his thing. So I feel like it's going to be hard for him maybe to replicate the 11.5 sacks from last year, and so he's somebody that I'm going to be out on this year.
They don't call him Dynasty Santa for nothing. What is your best piece of advice for Dynasty IDP managers? If you could tell them one thing that will help them win a championship, help our esteemed group here to bring home that title, maybe make a few bucks, get one of these fancy crowns on their head, what would it be?
Well, for dynasty managers, post your startup draft, right? So you're in year 2 and your rookie drafts are happening, anywhere from 4 or more rounds in your rookie draft. That's kind of the cutoff where I like to switch gears in taking shots on offensive rookies and kind of flip the switch to IDP. So that's where you can really restock your dynasty rosters with good, young, upcoming IDP rookies over, talking 6th round wide receivers, 7th round running backs who the odds are just very much stacked against them to produce in the future. And that's where you can clean up with 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round NFL draft capital guys on the IDP side. So I like loading up on IDPs in the back half of my dynasty rookie drafts.
Mr. Woellert, you're all about the dot, you're all about linebackers and snap counts. What's a linebacker that most people expect is going to be an every down guy that you think could disappoint this season?
I think it's going to be the rookie class as a whole. Between Colson and Edrin Cooper, Cedric Gray, and I'm guilty of it. As soon as these guys get drafted, it's like, oh, this linebacker's going to be 3 down and this linebacker's dead. I think I did it with the Chargers. They drafted Junior Colson. Oh, Diane Henley's dead. It's like, nah, he's not dead. Henley actually was called into plays again. So with Colson getting surgery, he's missing camp, and I know he's not familiar with Harbaugh, but you don't want to be missing out on these installs and these practices and these reps that you get. Cedric Gray, I haven't even heard from during camp. Edrin Cooper, again, he's playing behind Isaiah McDuffie, so I think the rookie class as a whole, I think, is going to disappoint. I've adjusted a lot of my projections on the rookies. I think for redraft purposes, I think for dynasty, obviously, you can, if those are your guys, you can target them. But for redraft, I'll take the known commodities right now. Because even last year, Jack Campbell, when he got drafted, Alex Anzalone is dead. No, that didn't end up happening.
He won't die.
Only two rookie linebackers played more than 600 snaps last season. Ivan Pace, he played 704, and Jack Campbell played 637. No other rookie linebacker played more than 500 snaps. So I need to tone it down and not overreact to when linebackers get drafted and have these fantastic landing spots for redraft purposes. So again, I think those rookie linebackers, they'll probably provide some midseason value because that's kind of where they start learning. All right, they're starting to play. So I think for midseason value, I think if you miss out on any of the rookies in your redraft leagues, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with it. So like if you miss out on Junior Colson and you have someone like, I don't know, maybe Kazir White, I think you're going to be in a much better position because you're getting a true full-time linebacker. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. That's kind of how I've adjusted my rookie production. I think it's the rookie linebackers as a whole this year are probably going to disappoint.
Mr. Edwards, now that Mike has said that all the rookie linebackers are terrible, second year IDP breakout, who is going to explode in 2024 in year 2 of the professional career?
Well, much like my colleagues here on stage, Ivan Pace was definitely somebody up until last night. A lot of us were super high on, but I'm going to go a different route, an extreme different route here, and I'm going to go with Devin Witherspoon. I think he's going to have an even bigger year than he had last year as a rookie. When you look at the number of snaps as a cornerback, he had probably the second highest box snap count of all defensive backs on the Seattle Seahawks. He had the most slot snap counts. So he was asked to blitz. I believe he even had a couple sacks last year. This guy's being utilized all over the field. And normally I do not recommend when you're in leagues where you just have a defensive lineman, a linebacker, and a defensive back spot to use a cornerback, I'd rather use a box safety, strong safety. We don't really use free safety and strong safety words. The position on the field where they're playing, so that's what we call it, the box safety, because you're playing closer to the line of scrimmage. So you want those box safeties to really help you with being de facto linebackers, getting those tackle points and that. But David Witherspoon, he could be an exception here at defensive back, just because his utilization all over the field for Seattle. The second they drafted him last year, I was like, this is like the rebuilding of the Legion of Boom all over again. I think he's a foundational piece of the secondary and something that could really, really take it to the next level in year 2.
Mr. Markham, Will Anderson Jr., the 2023 NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year, being drafted as a top 12 defensive lineman in more drafts than not. Are you buying or selling in that spot?
I'm buying strictly because I think that last year's production, albeit the sacks they were down from what we saw as far as the pressure rate and actually on film. And then the question that kind of comes up in my head is, was it a process or a product of Jonathan Bernard, who's fine, but he's not Donnell Hunter. And with the addition of Donnell Hunter, I have to think defenses are going to try to scheme to find a way to slow down one, probably pick and choose your enemy. Most likely they're going to pick Donnell Hunter. Does that mean that it's going to immediately impact sacks for Will Anderson? I think if you watched his production and watched because of why his draft capital was so high, you see that, that escalation into that first tier is a better case scenario than not. At least that's what I see. And I think that defense, talked about D'Amico Ryans already, anytime you're led by a great defensive coordinator, you have a complementary piece across from you, and you've got a secondary that can create coverage sacks. I do believe Derek Stingley's taken that next step as well. I'm buying. Now, I will say, I have been intrigued to see people taking Will Anderson over Donnell Hunter. That's still a little polarizing. I'm not quite sure there, but the player Will Anderson at that value currently, I'm buying.
Mr. McNeely, if you've read any of my work, you know that I wait to draft defensive backs. And I wait some more. Then I have a sandwich and take a nap and wake up. And then maybe I'll draft a safety. Give me one of those undervalued defensive backs that you can get late that will make me happy.
The first guy I thought of, I was looking over at ADP this week, was Julian Blackman for the Indianapolis Colts. On Sleeper, they have him way down in the 50s at DB 54. I kind of have him more around 22 on my rankings. He re-signed with the Colts. The Colts are number 2 in defensive snaps per game, so it's good having those defensive players on the field. But he also gets a lot of box snaps. And when he re-signed with the Colts, it's also good to have, he finished DB 18 in scoring average. It's good to have that same team, the same defensive coordinator, so you kind of know where they're going to kind of finish. And so I think Julian Blackman, the only concern I have that I'm keeping tabs on is that right now they're struggling to find who's going to play next to him. So they're the free safety spot. There's an open competition. Nick Cross, Ronnie Harrison, another guy. And if they don't find an answer, they may end up having to play Blackman at free safety, which could potentially drop his production. I think he'll still make some plays, but I may not be as sold on it. So it's something I'm also monitoring, even though right now, if I'm drafting today, I like his value. He may drop down a little bit for me. I think he'd still be a good value, but definitely keeping an eye on that battle there, see what the Colts are doing. Maybe they'll bring in somebody. I know Justin Simmons is still out there. Kind of waiting to see what they do on that. So, but Blackman is currently somebody I'm buying.
Flip side of that coin, Iggy. What's a defensive back that you don't want at Cox?
I mean, for 2 years in a row, it's a Cowboy. I feel like they overreact every year to the leading intercepting defensive back, and that's Deron Bland. He's at the top of a lot of lists. He was at the top of our MFL list when we went to go look at quarterbacks in our most recent draft. And, if you're getting out there, it's really easy just to look at who was good last year. And that's a fantasy problem in general. You look in the rearview mirror, not out the big windshield. And, if you can look forward and get past, he's had, give him credit, 14 interceptions in 2 years. That's pretty impressive. But I don't think it's going to be able to sustain, particularly with, as Leo just said, a new defensive coordinator. Their coordinator's now going to be playing against them. So I just think that he's going to take a step back. You should expect that. It's hard to repeat as number one in any position. IDP is not excluded from that. Boyce is just a monster. We're lucky to have him. But yeah, I would say Deron Bland. Don't have too high expectations. I think he's going to be a great defensive back. Maybe not the best fantasy defensive back.
Go back to the dynasty route with Santa Claus and his 8 tiny reindeer. What's your favorite, late round taxi squad? You're not necessarily counting on him this year. You want to be able to stash him for 2024.
Yeah, my favorite name, and I'm punishing myself here, I'm going to try my best. Dallas Cowboys rookie linebacker, Maris Liufau. 3rd round pick out of Notre Dame. I think he fell due to injury concerns. So he's a very talented guy that's basically going to redshirt his rookie year. But Cowboys are a little long in the tooth. They have Eric Kendricks for this year as their primary linebacker. Pretty sure he's a 1-year rental. So I think moving forward, we're going to see a combination of DeMarvion Overshone and Liufau going forward. So he's free, even in dynasty rookie drafts. He's very low on a lot of projections because he probably isn't going to play much in year 1. So he's a free square for me for dynasty leagues.
Mr. Woellert, who you got? Alex Singleton or the aforementioned Aziz Al-Shari?
I'm going to go with the linebacker we affectionately refer to as Singleton, and I'm running with Alex Singleton. Ashir had not going to lie, had a huge season with the Titans. Turned that into a contract, and he's got a relationship with D'Amico Ryans. But Singleton has a track record of elite tackle production, consecutive seasons of 160 plus tackles, 120 plus tackles in 4 straight seasons. He's also getting solo tackles. He's got 100 plus solos in consecutive seasons. And in tackle leagues, that's 200 points right there just for solo tackles. So, if I'm drafting, I'm probably taking Alex Singleton.
You just hurt my feelings.
That was what I was going for.
You did. Mr. Edwards, give me a sleeper. I hate the word sleeper, I really do. Give me a sleeper defensive line pick this year, and why is it my renewal?
I'd love to answer that, but I got somebody else in mind here. Yaya Diaby, edge rusher for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We go back to weeks 10 through 18 when the snap percentages started to get high. He was tied with people like Daniil Hunter, Micah Parsons, Harold Landry, Montez Sweat, with 6.5 sacks. His solo to assist tackle ratio was very good. Basically what I mean by that is he was getting more solo tackles than assisted. Solo tackles count for more fantasy points. You definitely want that. When you use Fantasy Pros IDP scoring, he was right there at the top 10 finish from weeks 10 through 18. He's going to get that starting opportunity. He did have a foot injury, I want to say, the first week of training camp, but apparently that's not something that people should be worried about for the long term. And like I said, this Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, a lot of unknowns outside of Levante David and Antoine Winfield Jr. And I think he's definitely going to continue this trend that you saw last year. Again, I talked about it earlier, the Carl Granderson effect. You saw as its snaps went up, as the season went on a couple years ago, that carried over into last year. I think we're going to see the same thing again with them.
Byron, it's still Byron. Mr. Markham. If there's one individual defensive player that you just have to have this season, I mean, you go into a draft, you're like, I want that guy on my team. Who is it?
Well, I'll combine, because earlier I had a similar question, and I went with Ivan Pace. And I'm going to use the same thing here because I feel that he's, quote unquote, that sleeper that we hate using. Because the one thing that I will address that I think is important to know is that every single person here might have a completely different IDP league that we play in for roster requirements. You may have, well, I know, you have like 30 at each position, but you may have 3. And the LB 30 is then, by definition, kind of like a quote-unquote sleeper pick because it's not someone that's going to be paramount. But Mike Woellert touched on it earlier. This is basically a tag team game between me and Mike, whereas next year what we'll know to do is write down our answers so we basically just don't pick each other up. But in reality, isn't that exactly what we're here for, is to hear 2 people that they asked to be on this panel agree with a player? I think that builds maybe more credibility, and the long-winded way of getting there is Tyrell Dotson, who fills into, I want to look at a linebacker as a sleeper or as a person I want to draft in a scheme that plays a lot of zone. They have a great defensive mind. They have plenty of play and snap opportunities. And I think he fits the role there completely. We've seen production. We've seen Cody Barton not even know who's running through the hole and still put up good fantasy production. That's not a knock on us, Mike. We still love Cody Barton. You know. But let's look at the small sample size that Dotson did to build up a little bit from what he said earlier. From week 7 on, when he had the majority of his snaps, he was 23rd in solos. He was PFF's second graded linebacker. Play was there. Production was there. He was the LB 38 in Fantasy Pros points per game overall. Not exactly great, but if you look at from the time that he took over the majority of the production, he exceeded odds, exceeded expectations. You can't get it for free, but it's pretty close towards the end. And I just think that it seems like an easy bottom kind of roster filler for someone that's going to give you constant week in and week out production.
All right, Your Majesty. He who smoked an entire league full of supposed experts. 13-1, beat me twice, killed me in the championship game. Again, I'm not bitter. I don't have a Leo McNeely voodoo doll at home. I do not jam pins in it every night before I go to bed to make myself feel better. Well, every other night, maybe. It's the biggest mistake IDP managers make in redrafts.
I would say the biggest, we talked a little bit about this question earlier. I think it does come down to sometimes feeling like you have to draft a defensive player too early. But also, I think, we talked about drafting rookies too early. Like that would be another thing in a redraft you wouldn't want to do. I think sometimes we see these ADPs, average draft position. We see those guys get moved up because people are drafting dynasty drafts early, and that impacts the ADP that you see. We don't see a lot of ADP that's just for redrafts. So I think sometimes taking those rookies too early, taking defense too early can make a difference. But you really have to kind of look at your league scoring, see your league roster requirements. So that would be kind of. And then sometimes we even see people making the mistake of drafting defensive backs too early. There's a lot of depth there. That's not a position that you should be hammering. But potentially some of those people that may have not played it, they feel like, I got to get this top guy at this position. He's the number 1 on my board. He's still there, but you can wait on that position. So that would be another thing I would recommend.
Mr. Gilbert, who you got? Aiden Hutchinson or Josh Allen Hines?
The Hines, yeah. I
I
forgot.
had to tack that on.
Thanks for reminding me.
Keep yelling at me all the time that I'm not spelling his name right.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. I didn't write the Hines on my notes. But yeah, for me, it's really 6 one way and half a dozen another. Like, they're so close. I took Allen Hines in our draft yesterday, and Hutchinson was available. But I think Hutchinson could also have it. But you're putting me in a corner. I got to say a name to get out. It could be Josh Allen Hines. I just think, it wasn't a fluke. He wasn't doing it just to get paid. I think there's potential there. There's always been potential there. And Detroit's probably going to play with the positive game script, but Jacksonville could come back and play better with the healthy Trevor Lawrence, which would help Josh Allen create pressure. Josh Allen Hines, that is.
Hines. Catch it. except spelled different. Santa Claus, it's Christmas time. It's time to give a gift to IDP managers. Your single best piece of advice.
It's a bit generic, but if you're in an IDP league, whether it's redraft or dynasty or both, ultimately, simply paying attention, watching those snap counts, watching who's getting the opportunities, and myself and all these wonderful people up here do a lot of work for you. So if you don't have the time to do that, check us all out, and we help you, put together the data in a way that you can digest it and give our opinions directed by the data. But snap counts are just so important. So you pay attention to the snap counts, check out what's going on opportunity-wise, and you'll do great.
I keep hammering linebackers with you, Mike, but that's your thing. Give us another breakout. Give us a guy. Linebackers are what wins IDP leagues. So go ahead. Offer some.
So, as far as a breakout linebacker, this is probably recency bias, but I got to say Trenton Simpson looked pretty good in his first preseason game. As of right now, last season the Ravens primarily a two-linebacker defense. Zach Orr is probably going to bring that same principle. John Harbaugh's still the coach. Could do more dime single linebacker with all the DBs, but I'm not gonna speculate. But I think Trenton Simpson, with his range of outcomes and snap share, could be between 80 and 95%. I'm willing to bet that he's going to fall within that 90%, range. I think, like I said, I think he's ready to take on a larger role. When Roquan Smith says, "Yeah, this kid can play," I think that's a pretty good. Testimonial that he's ready to play. So should see a 3-down role. I think last season I think Baltimore saw enough in 26 snaps out of their 3rd-round pick to move on from Patrick Queen and not dole out bags of cash. Week 17, he had 7 tackles, 2 for loss, a QB hit, and a sack in 26 snaps in Week 18. So, and then he had 11 tackles in his first preseason game. So, I think he's primed for a breakout season. I've got him projected at about 75 solos and 125 total tackles. I think you can look at him as a pretty solid LB3.
Mr. Edwards.
Yes, sir.
Frankie Louvu switched teams in the offseason to your beloved Washington Commanders.
Yes, he did.
Are you buying or selling him as a top 15 linebacker?
I'm selling him. A lot of the reports that are coming out of Commanders camp and Commanders news circles is that Dan Commander wants to kind of utilize him more on the edge. And so with that being the case, you're kind of decreasing the opportunity for higher tackle volume, which would then elevate him into that high DB2, low DB1 range. And that concerns me. That concerns me a lot. And so while he did finish as LB 20, so close to the top LB 15 spot last year in Carolina, where he was also used to a certain degree as an outside edge rusher. From what I'm hearing, Louvu is going to be kind of prominently featured in that role. And without the tackle volume, I don't see him cracking the top 15.
That's what I was afraid of when Washington signed him, was that you look at the edge rushers and there's just not much there. I hate it because I love Frankie Louvu. He's a joy to watch play football. I think he's a great ad for the Commanders. I just think his IDP value is going to take a hit this year. Nate, the top rookie defensive back, short and long term.
Yeah, when looking at rookie defensive backs, Gary, you probably have never drafted a rookie defensive back in your life. I'm not sure if you've ever drafted an actual defensive back in your life, because when you want Kevin Byard, he's never there. I know that hurts and stings, but when we look at rookie defensive backs and opportunity and why they may be fantasy relevant, outside of the aforementioned Devin Witherspoon, most are not corners. Typically, most are, as Jorge said again, box safeties. So short term, I wanted to look for a safety that was going to have a direct line to snaps, play in a role that was going to be conducive to point scoring. And the initial player that I liked was Cole Bishop with the Buffalo Bills. Now, we've seen 2 weeks later, The shoulder injury still hasn't healed up properly. He's on the bike. He's not playing quite yet. I'm not going to get terribly concerned. I still think in the short term that makes sense. But I'm going to meld the short and long term together because there's a player, and I think this is the last question. I have the microphone, so I can go on the Kansas City Chiefs reign if I want. It works out really well for Mr. Mike Hicks because his name's Jaden Hicks. You can buy a jersey. People make fun of you because you have your last name on it. But then you'll say, no, it's Jaden Hicks, who's going to be, I believe, Kansas City starting safety. Justin Reed's, I believe, again, I think the injury's going to lose out on snaps. Will it be immediate this year the entire time? I think it's also a long-term play, like Gary had asked. But Jaden Hicks combines exactly what you want. You want to play for a defensive coordinator that likes to blitz off the corner. You like to play box safety. Defensive schemes have really, in the last couple of years, we've seen defensive backs with the Chiefs be productive. So all those pieces kind of come together. Jaden Hicks is extraordinarily athletic. He has an eye for the ball. He's a good tackler. Everything that you would want to see in your strong safety, especially if you're waiting until round 32 to draft your defensive back like Gary does.
I wouldn't necessarily wait that. Look, round 28, 29. Back to you, Jorge. Give me a defensive lineman that you don't want, that overvalued. You're just out.
So I was a big fan of him last year in Miami when Jalen Phillips would go out due to injury, and that's Andrew Van Ginkel, or who I like to call Van Ginkel because it's fun to say his last name like that. Yes, I'm a dork, don't sue me. But he goes over to the Minnesota Vikings, and you think it's going to be him and the Jonathan Bernard show, and then the Vikings draft Dallas Turner. For those who saw last night, Dallas Turner got his first sack. It looks fantastic. Yes, I know it's preseason, but you know, even the value that you would have gotten with Van Ginkel, with Dallas Turner just chomping at the bit, I don't think it's going to be long before you see those snap percentages kind of trend towards Dallas Turner as the season goes on. So even the value that you could have gotten with Van Ginkel had there not been a rookie edge rusher drafted, I don't think we're going to get anymore. So I'm going to pivot away from that.
Leo, your single best piece of IDP advice?
I mean, first of all, if you haven't played IDP, I'd recommend playing, and it's a lot of fun. It adds a whole another layer to the game, and you watch football a little bit differently. You've seen both offense and defense. But then once you do play, then the best advice, we talked about snap counts. Watching those snap counts, finding the data. RPO Football has it. A bunch of these other guys say you can find it with all of our sites. And even on Sleeper, and is really paying attention to those snap counts. Who's not only snap counts but also snap percentage. You want a guy that's going to be on the field close to 100%. Maybe D line, maybe closer to 80%. Usually really would be top. But then those safeties too. You want to make sure, or even a corner, that they're not getting pulled off on third down. So really paying attention to those snap counts. That's kind of the number one thing I would say is going to make a difference when you're making those waiver wire moves and you're trying to make a run for the playoffs and the championship. Is paying attention to the snap counts.
Well, you guys once again turf through my list of questions like maniacs. Let's say everyone should be institutionalized. Well, yes, definitely, maybe, for sure. Jorge will leave out in society, and Nate, lock him up. So we're just gonna go down the line. I don't know if you want to talk about a player, if you want to talk about strategy, if you want to talk about whatever. The floor is yours, starting with you.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't played, I just encourage that, like Leo said. And scoring's a big deal. You got Matt up here with their format and Santa, and there's different variation, which I'm all about being custom. Change and differences are a great thing, not a bad thing. But figure out which one you like more. Maybe you like a big sack. Maybe the sack is one of your favorite plays. The kick return rules. Maybe you got a defensive back that's returning kicks. Nixon for Green Bay, who has led the league. the past 2 years. Maybe you get a sneaky play in that way with the special teams if you're getting special team point guards. So there's all kinds of things that you can incorporate in IDP, and that's kind of what I want to spread. Be creative with it, you know? We've got the PPR, we've got the Superflex on offense. The cool thing about IDP is make the points worth it. You know, our Kings Classics is different than any other league I play in, and I love it. And I think it allows creativity in a sport and a hobby that should have more creativity in it. So that's kind of my pitch, and that's what I want to say. Go get your guys, you know. I got Alex Singleton, so that was reaffirming for Mike to say that, living in Colorado. So, you know, Wonder guy, Bo Nixon, he may not be able to sustain drives. So, you know, research, have fun with it, that helps, but let the creativity drive you. That's my emphasis.
I didn't realize that we were up against it on time. So, I mean, do we want to do the giveaways now or just step off to the side so that we're not bothering? Because we got some stuff to give away. We have a Football Guys Hall of Fame membership, 2 spots in the Fantasy Football Oasis IDP Brouhaha, delightful Aaron Donald canvas print. So, Jorge, pull a ticket out.
All right, ticket number 35343-005.
Catch up with me.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not worried.
We got 35343-013.
Yep.
There's another one. We got 35343-016.
See me after
No more, Gary. How many are we pulling out here?
Okay, we got Mike is giving away.
So I'll be giving away a free paid subscription.
000 is the next one.
So this is to the IDP show and a free entry into our IDP Madness tournament.
000, last 3 digits.
Right, you need to get with Mike.
We have a free subscription to RPO Football for the full upcoming season, and a polo shirt as well.
001. 001. All right, there we go.
See you. Finally, my guy, 99, quite possibly the greatest 3-technique tackle. I'm not going to lie, when it showed up at my house, I was like, do I really need to take that to camp and give it to people? Or can I just keep it and hang it on my wall? So I'm probably going to order another one, but anyway.
All right, 002. You get the Aaron Donald canvas print here. Where's 002? No 002? No?
002?
Going once? Going twice? All right, well, I guess we have to pick another one. Hold on. 010.
We got a 010 out there?
Nope. Okay. Here we go. 010. All right.